I learned about the circles of impact from Bob Garrity, who is a mediator here in Charlottesville, and I use it all the time when I'm working with students. It is a visual that is a little like throwing a pebble on a pond and seeing the ripple outward. I use it usually when I'm at the who was affected or whose day changed part of the conversation. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. The biggest thing is you need to make sure you have a big enough piece of paper or a whiteboard to be able to expand out your circles. Sometimes people are a little surprised by how big their ripples get, especially when you're working with younger kids or kids who are a little egocentric. High school kids sometimes just think that they're the only ones that are impacted by their behaviors. So here it is. There's an image on the page that goes along with this video. But you start by making a circle and putting the student or maybe two students' names in it. You might be working with a couple of kids, and you ask, is that who was involved? And they'll say sure. And then you say, who else's day changed or who else was affected by your behavior? Sometimes they'll say nobody, and they'll need some prompting. So I might draw a circle around that circle and put the teacher's name in there. And I'll say, do you think that the teacher planned to have you start yelling in the middle of their language arts lesson? Of course, the child will say, no, I didn't think that. Say, okay, who else was impacted? Again, the child might freeze and say, well, it was just me and the teacher, and that was it. And so I put another circle around that, and I'll put the number of students in the class, and they'll say, what's that? And I'll say, well, is that how many students are in their class? And they'll agree. And I'll say, okay, so do you think that you made it easier or harder for them to learn when you started disrupting it? So do you think they were affected? And they'll agree. And then you keep building, um, what about the principal that got involved? Or what about the pre-K child that was surprised as you walked by in the hall? Or what about the librarian who heard you yelling as you were going through their space? What about your parents? Did they expect to have this happen and get a phone call because, did they wake up this morning and say, you know what, I bet you during PE time, my child's going to have some problems? No, they didn't. Um, and so you can build this, and then by doing that, you start to have the kids start to think about, who can, how can we help fix that problem? One thing that you can sometimes do if a child is really pushing back on that nobody else is affected is to draw it. And then after you've gotten out pretty far, draw another circle to include the parents of the children who are in the class. Um, so that they can see that those children are going to go home and they're going to talk about this situation, and the parents are going to start having some thoughts and ideas. Now, the purpose of the circles is not to shame the child. It's really important that when you're doing it delicately so that you're showing the child that you're just showing how their behavior affected people and who the behavior affected. Not that we're trying to shame them into anything, but to show the ripple effect of what happens with their behavior. I found it to be really, really successful. I've even had children go into classes and walk up to the board and draw circles so that they can show the teacher and other kids how different things are affecting what's going on. It's pretty powerful.